Hi guys, my name is Catalina Delgado. Just before I start my presentation, I want to say a few things. So first of all, thank you for joining us. This webinar is presented by brightbod.com. I would also like to inform you guys that I am not a professional doctor and I will not be giving medical advice tonight. I will only be sharing my personal experience about this topic. Also, we're going to be muting all your microphones throughout the presentation to kind of eliminate all the sound nearby. But then towards the end of my presentation, we're going to unmute your microphones. So I welcome you to ask as many questions as you would like. It would make this presentation a lot more interactive if you ask any questions that come to mind. Also, if you are not watching currently live, you can always log into brightbod.com after this presentation is posted, and you can post any questions that you have through video, and then either I or someone else can respond back to your question through video. So, awesome. So now I'm going to start my presentation. So, sorry. Right. Okay, so I'm going to be presenting something about the siblings of children with autism and what that means and how to deal with that. So again, my name is Catalina Delgado. So I have a personal connection with this theme. I have a brother with autism. He's currently 9 years old. When he was diagnosed at the year of 2, I was 14 and just transitioning into high school. And I have another brother who's also in that picture as well. He's the middle child, and he was 5 years old. And so that transition, I was transitioning into high school, and my younger brother was not very understanding of what happened once Nicholas was diagnosed. And so I think that me and him really felt a lot of stress, a lot of confusion, because we just didn't understand what was going on, especially, somebody who's 5 years old, you can't really explain that well what autism is and what it means for your life and how it affects your family. And so I definitely dealt with how it feels to be kind of left with some sort of confusion, because I wasn't really told exactly what autism was. It was kind of almost like a stigma in my family to talk about it. And so I feel like that just created a lot of unnecessary stress. And I think it's hard for parents sometimes to talk about it with their other children. So I think that this topic is great for anybody who is trying to figure out how to deal with this. So I hope that this helps in some way. So the effects of autism on siblings. There's many effects that come into mind. Jealousy is definitely one of them. It comes with any type of sibling bond, but especially jealousy, because, as you have a child with autism, you want to take care of them and you want to give them all the accommodations as possible to, I guess, help them with their special needs. And sometimes it takes too much. It takes a lot of effort. And so sometimes the other sibling is left kind of in the dark. And so that sibling starts to feel, some sort of jealousy. Also, they could feel frustrated because they're not really sure exactly why they're feeling this way or why their parents are treating them differently than they do to their sibling with autism. They could feel anger maybe because they don't understand why their parents are kind of favoring their sibling over them. They could also feel embarrassed. And this is something that I've gone through myself, and also I've seen my brother go through, that, you feel guilty about it, but, sometimes you're out in public and you're, a teenager, you're a young child, and your brother starts to act out. You start to have a temper, like you don't know what to do, you don't know, and you feel bad because he's your brother and you want to protect him, but at the same time, you're also thinking about yourself. And so then comes the emotion of guilt, and you start to feel guilty about how you feel. And that happens a lot to siblings of children with autism. And also the stress, because it creates stress, whether it's something more obvious or something that the child keeps within themselves. But, they're frustrated and they're angry and they don't really know how to deal with the change that comes in the family once a child is diagnosed with autism. But there are definitely a lot of positive effects that also come with having a sibling with autism. And I think overall bigger picture, it weighs out the negative ones. So number one, you end up, siblings with children with autism are a lot more protective than an average sibling. You know, you're always going to look out for your brother or sister because you know that they need some sort of somebody to keep eye on them, especially if you're older. You're always going to look out for them. It also gives you a lot of perspective because, you know, when you're younger and you're dealing with something that a lot of people don't deal with, having somebody with autism in the family, it kind of gives you a bigger idea of like what a problem is and how to figure it out. Because, you know, like other kids your age, maybe you're in elementary school or middle school or high school, and they're worried about what their clothes are like or their shoes, or they got something new and it's exciting. But to you, it's kind of like you have a bigger perspective on things, like what problems are, and you know how to deal with problems better because you've already dealt with that sort of conflict at home. And you know that, you know, what might seem like a huge problem for other kids, it's not as big of a deal as they make it seem. You're also more compassionate than I think a lot of neurotypical children because, you know, like you're dealing with a brother or sister with autism, and you start to realize like how much they have to go through and how much they deal with at school, or their difficulties socializing with other people, and you start to feel compassionate for other people too, especially people with mental illnesses and mental disorders. You start to feel you have a sweet spot for them. You know, you're always going to look out for them because you're internally always thinking about your sibling. You're also learn to become more patient. That's definitely, I learned that the hard way to be more patient because of my brother. You know, like we go out to certain public outings and he's throwing a temper tantrum, or he wants to go the long way instead of the short way because he's used to going the long way. And, you know, I just kind of have to sit there and let him take it because, you know, you just have to do that for your siblings. And so it definitely creates a lot of patience. And you also learn to be more mature. Definitely. Sometimes I think maybe a little too mature. A lot of kids, a lot of siblings of children with autism have to learn to be mature very early on. But I mean, overall, it works out because you start to take other things seriously as well. And the maturity just, it comes out. You know, you're always protecting your brother or sister. You also become more tolerant, and you're more tolerant towards others, especially towards others with such special needs. So it makes you a better person all around. So basically, how would you explain autism to siblings? So if you have a child and he's especially younger and you don't know exactly how to deal with explaining autism to them, it's not something that it's not tangible. It's not something that you can show them. So you can have to explain it in a way that they will understand. So you definitely want to use language or ideas that are suitable for your child's age understanding. So for example, like you wouldn't try to explain autism to your child in elementary school using very fancy like scientific jargon, or trying to understand the neurotransmitters or the neurological pathways of autism. You want to be as simple as possible so that they understand and they're not scared. You want to keep them in the loop. You also want to address what your child thinks and what they might know about autism. You know, they might hear about it at school, or they might not know somebody else at school who has autism. Maybe they already have a general idea of what autism could be. It could be wrong. They could be on the right pathway, but you definitely want to understand that. You kind of want to guide them so that they're not have the wrong perception of what autism could be. You also want to keep your children informed of their siblings' process. So I think this is something that's extremely crucial when it comes to having other children. When you also have a child with autism, you definitely want to keep your children in loop of what's happening to their sibling, because at the end of the day, they all care about each other, brothers and sisters alike, whether they have autism or not. And so when something happens to your sibling, you always want to be in the know of what they're doing, how they're doing in school, or how they're progressing. You know, it doesn't have to be everyday topic at the dinner table, but just every once in a while something exciting happens that you want to update the siblings with. That's definitely something that you want to keep in mind, because they want to also feel incorporated into the family, and autism plays a big role in a family. So if you kind of just shy away from it, that they're not going to be completely included. So these are some books to help you kind of your children understand what autism is and how it affects people. So here I have Ian's Walk, all about my brother and everybody is different, a book for young people who who have brothers or sisters with autism. So I definitely recommend that you guys look into these books. A lot of children, especially children in elementary school, they, you know, you're maybe having a hard time trying to explain it to them. So if you give them some sort of picture book or something like this, then they might be able to wrap their minds around it a little better. This is something also that you can share with, family, friends, or cousins, or, just anybody, like especially any young child that, could be affected by autism and you don't know exactly how to explain it to them. You can share these books with them, and I think it will be beneficial to them. So how can you help your child reach their potential in terms of the sibling? So you want to make time for your child let me explain that. So you want to make time for your children, not just the one with the autism, but also your other child. So you always want to make special time for them and just them alone. You want time to just like with the parents and the child alone and have a babysitter or like the grandparents for a night to stay with your other child with autism, because you also want to make sure that they feel that they have a special bond with their parents. And you want to make sure that all your children feel special in some way. Even though autism is not seen as something that's like incredible or something magical, for siblings of children with autism, sometimes they want to feel like they're special, or they have something that sets them apart from the crowd. And even though like their sibling has autism, they want to feel something special too. And so for their parents especially, they want to feel like they're included and accepted. You also want to encourage a closer relationship between your own children. So, sometimes kids have a funny way of showing that their relationship. For example, my two younger brothers, Nicholas, one with autism, he's 9 years old, and the other one, he's 12 years old now. And even though like my youngest brother, Nicholas, who's 9, he's not very verbal. There's certain songs that he loves to sing. And so my other brother, he will sing to him or he will dance with them. And sometimes like he doesn't even know what song Nicholas is singing, and like they just sing and dance together, and that's their way of bonding. They don't sit down or like they don't show their relationship like maybe other brothers do, but for them, that's what helps them bond. They also sometimes like to wrestle, and sometimes even my parents get mad because they're like, oh, like don't be rough with your brother, but that's just how they show their bond. You should also try to be as fair and consistent punishing your children as possible. This is where there's kind of a gray area when it comes to parenting children, especially children with autism. You obviously like know that there's a certain limitation to how your children will understand when to do something or not to do something. So you kind of always want to be a little nicer to the child with autism. But when it comes to something that maybe one child has broken a rule and then the other child with autism has broken the same rule and they get a lighter punishment, it might sort of cause confusion and anger and stress for the other child, the sibling. So, you have to try to be as consistent and as fair as possible, and especially in front of the sibling. Maybe the sibling understands a little bit better, so you kind of have to sit him down and explain to him, listen, you got this punishment because you know exactly what you did wrong. But you have to kind of address that. You can't just assume that the sibling is going to understand that they're getting a heavier punishment just because they should be able to understand more. It should be addressed. And also you should be able to try to manage your children's negative feelings if there is any. You should try not to judge your children for any negative feelings that they may have, because it's something that's completely normal. And I mean, I felt them too, especially in the beginning when my brother was diagnosed, and I really didn't know what to expect. And, it's very easy for a child to say like, oh, because of like his diagnosis, financial burdens have happened, and like now I can't get the new shoes that I wanted, or I can't do this, or I can't do that, or I can't go out because my brother might throw a tantrum. Things like that happen, and it's perfectly normal for your child to feel, some sort of negative feelings towards their sibling. But at the end of the day, you should also address those and not just shy them away. You want all your children to feel like they're able to talk to you, so you shouldn't, quickly just tell them you shouldn't be feeling this way. Try to understand why they're feeling that way and what things you can do to kind of help them address those feelings without feeling like they're going to be punished if they bring them up to you. Also, I recommend that when you sit down and you talk to your child about what they feel autism is and how you can explain it to them, if they feel that they that they have a problem maybe understanding autism or explaining it to somebody else, you should always be there and like support them, because maybe they want to tell their friends about it, or maybe one day, I don't know, like you're picking up your child from school, the sibling, and the other child with autism is in the car, or they're walking by and they throw some sort of tantrum, or they're flapping their hands or something like that. You should always give your child the ability and, I guess, the guide so that they can explain autism to their friends or to their cousins or anybody else who's around their age that maybe they have trouble explaining what autism is. So, okay. So something else I completely forgot to add this in. Some things that you could talk about, and especially when you're talking about what autism is to your children, certain things that you could say could be, you know, if you need help explaining it to your friends, I'm here for you and I can help you figure it out. You can also help your sibling with autism by playing them and showing them how to do things. Now, this is where you shouldn't put the burden, or not the burden, I guess the responsibility of sometimes taking care of the sibling, because maybe your child feels that, oh, I need to take care of my sibling more than, you know, like an average sibling does. But no, like they should be there enough to like play with their sibling and to show support for them, but it's not the responsibility either to look out for their siblings all the time. So that's when you have to set your boundary. You have to be like, you can help out by playing with them, you can help out by showing them or helping them tie their shoes or something like that, but don't feel like you have that responsibility to look out for your sibling all the time, or to punish them, or to do something out of the normal, you know, that a sibling shouldn't be required to do. Also, especially for very young children, you have to make sure that they understand that autism isn't something that you can catch, because, you know, it's funny, like things that I hear at school, especially when I like volunteer with kids with autism, sometimes like there's a stigma, and you just want to make sure, even though it sounds silly, just to like address as many things that your child might think they know about autism. They also have to know that it's nobody's fault. You know, it's not you, the parent's fault. It's not anybody else's fault. It just happens. And also that, you know, as your child starts to get older, you can explain to them more that, you know, autism happens before the child is even born. Something that just happens naturally. It happens in the child's brain. So it's not something that you can prevent, as we know now. And you can also kind of give them some sort of idea and experience of what autism could be like for their siblings. So for example, you could tell them like, hey, listen, think about it kind of like if you're at a concert, or you're turning your TV up really, really loud and the volume is extremely loud and it starts to hurt your ears. Now think about you feeling like that all the time. You know, like it starts to get bothersome. And that's just one of the ways that children with autism and people with autism feel, you know, that they have so much coming at them, so much volume, and so much, the lights are very bright, things like that. Like you can give them sensory examples so that they can really understand their sibling and help out in any way that they can. But to really like bring the point home is that you want to make sure that your child understands what autism is, to always try to keep them in the loop of what the siblings' progress, because even though you might think like, oh, they're so young, they're not going to notice what's happening, or, you know, it's not important to them, but it really is. You know, children pick up more than you think that they do, and they listen more than you think that they do. So always try to keep them in the loop. And it's better to be more upfront and open about autism than to just kind of not talk about it, because it really just creates a lot of stress, a lot of frustration that, you know, could be prevented from the beginning. At the end of the day, you know, like siblings love each other and they're always out there to protect their siblings. So just the best way that you can do that is just to be as honest and as open about it as possible with all your children. Okay. So if anybody has any questions or any concerns or anything like that.
Catalina, what are the name of the 3 books again?
Let me back that up for you. Those are the books. Ian's Walk, All About My Brother, Everybody is Different, a book for young people who have brothers or sisters with autism.
And you can get these about at Barnes and Nobles, right?
Yes, or you can order them online as well. They're all under $20, $15 under that.
I have a
Thank
question.
you.
Yes.
Which, um, how, in trying to foster a closer relationship between the non-autistic child and the sibling, the autistic and the autistic sibling, how do you balance trying to have them have a close relationship and not letting the non-autistic child become the caregiver?
Okay, so how old are the two children?
You, I, I would say older because you would have one with the responsibility.
Okay.
So
I totally understand that. So, like I was saying, I have a brother who's 12, and then the other one is 9. So there's only a 3-year, I mean, a 3-year difference between both. Even though the one who's 12 is still pretty young, um, sometimes it does happen that they want to look out for their sibling more than they have to. And I feel the same way sometimes with my brother. Sometimes I want to go the extra mile because I love him so much and I want to cooperate as much as possible. But sometimes also it's very easy to fall into that trap that you just become almost like their caregiver sometimes. So I think definitely when it comes to that, number one, the parent needs to kind of lay down the boundary as to where they're crossing the line. And it's not a bad thing. I mean, I don't want to make it seem like it's a bad thing that their sibling wants to take care of their brother or sister. It's just, it creates a lot of stress for them. And so you should definitely give the child that doesn't have autism, like time for them to do their own thing. So if you see that they're spending way too much time trying to take care of their brother or sister, or they're stressing about it all the time, then you need to be like, hey, you know what, today I'm going to take care of your brother or sister. Why don't you go out and you go to the gym, or you go to school, or go read a book, do something that you like. So always try to give them time and the space and the opportunity for them to do something on their own, even if it's not something forceful. But listen, I'm going to stay home with the child today so that you can go and do your own thing, and then they won't feel guilty about it. So I think guilt also plays into that, so that you want to make sure this is not something that you're doing that's wrong. If anything, it makes you a better brother or sister if you're not as stressed and as worried because you've become the caregiver. No, I want you to feel as happy as possible so that you can also enjoy your bond with your siblings. So you need to go out and do your own thing. So I think that's something that I don't know if that answered your question, or if you have maybe clarify it.
no, that was great. Thank you.
Have you ever
Carolina.
been?
Yeah. Yeah.
Hi, Catalina. Your sibling with autism, that's Nicholas, right?
Yes, Nicholas.
Okay. Now, have you ever had to or tried to explain to him what autism is? And if so, what do you say to him?
I have never tried to explain autism to him. He is 9 years old and he can communicate very mildly. He doesn't if you ask him a question, he'll answer it most of the time if it's a yes or no question. But he doesn't really understand, right? I believe he doesn't understand it more than that. If I were to ask him, what did you do at school today? Or what do you want to eat for lunch? Sometimes he just doesn't answer back, or he just starts to say random things. And so I have never tried to explain autism to him. And I don't think he would understand what autism means. Sometimes what I try to do is that there's this song, I don't know if you've heard of it. It's called what's it called? Something about everybody being beautiful, and he loves to sing it all the time. And so I just kind of repeat that to him, and I'm like, oh, you're beautiful, because in your own way. But I haven't really tried to explain autism to him. When he's older, definitely my parents and I, we want to include him in some way into that talk once he's able to understand more. But as of now, I haven't been able to talk to him about that.
Now, how about your other sibling? Have you had that conversation with your other sibling?
Yes. So he's 12 years old. Like I said, when he was younger, when Nicholas was around 5 or 6, There wasn't really that conversation that we had about autism. We kind of just assumed that he wasn't going to understand, or that he was too young, or he wasn't really going to be affected by it. So what happened was that as he started to get older, you know, he was in elementary school and I was in high school. My parents were very focused on Nicholas, and it's not something that, you know, like that I can be mad about, because obviously my brother needed that attention. But it kind of came off that they were choosing him over us. And it wasn't something that was explicit. It was just, you know, in everyday life, there are certain things that they would do or say that like I started to realize a little bit earlier than my other brother. And so I started to look up autism up on my own. And I would talk to other people about autism, even though I wasn't very open about telling people I had a brother with autism. It actually took me a really long time to admit it to some of my friends, because I kind of was so confused, and I wasn't completely sure about my brother's abilities, and I was kind of scared also about his prognosis, that I really didn't want to say it out loud to other people that I knew. So I'd either find myself Googling things at night or asking my teachers. And so I thought about myself, and, you know, I at least had those resources available to search things up. But then I think about my brother, who was 5, 6, 7 years old at the time. He had no clue how to look at anything up on his own. He probably didn't even know what he was looking for, but he must have felt some sort of shift in the family, because I could feel it. And, you know, as a younger child, like, you want attention from your parents, and he just didn't feel that. It also comes with being a middle child, but especially having a sibling with autism, it's very hard. And so for a while, we just assumed he didn't really understand. But, you know, as he started to get older, he would ask sometimes, like, well, like, why doesn't Nico to talk to me? Or like, why doesn't Nico play with me? Or why does he flap his hands? And so, you know, the autism word started to get thrown around more and more often. And I kind of realized it's a lot easier for me to talk about it, because I'm a little bit more honest with him about it. And, you know, I can get down to his level because I'm obviously younger. And also my parents are bilingual, but their native language is Spanish. So sometimes it's hard for them to, you know, completely bring home the point about autism to my other brother. But I felt that, you know, giving him examples about what autism is and how Nicholas feels it in his own terms, and how it's hard, but at the end of the day, you know, like, he's your brother and you love him no matter what. And, you know, Santiago, the brother without autism, he's been extremely cooperative, and he's been very responsible and mature about it. Even though sometimes I sense that he has trouble with it, especially because at some point Nicholas and my other brother went to the same school. And so I could tell sometimes that Santiago, the one without autism, had some trouble, you know, sometimes saying hi to my other brother, or, you know, hugging him at school, because sometimes Nicholas would throw a tantrum, or he would start flapping his hands, and Santiago would kind of like run from him, or he would kind of just like get nervous or embarrassed around him. And, you know, like, for me, I kind of was more understanding of that, because I mean, I understand what that embarrassment is like, and like the guilt that comes with it. But it was a little bit, I think, harder for my parents to understand that. But, you know, like, now at this point, my brother's in middle school, and I'm always encouraging him, like, listen, it doesn't matter what other people think about your brother. When we go out in public, people stare. But at the end of the day, like, you don't know these people, and they're just being judgmental. You know that your brother's a good person, and you know that it's not his fault that he has autism. So you just need to love him for who he is. And if, you know, you ever need help trying to explain that to other people, you let me know, and I will try to clarify that for you. So.
Great. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Have you ever been out in public where you see maybe like another child with autism that maybe the parents can't really handle them, and have you ever like tried to intervene or something, like just to kind of help them out?
So it's happened a few times that, you know, I've seen other parents when they have children with autism, but, you know, in the same way that sometimes I go out with my parents and we're with my brother, and he, you know, starts to cry, or he's on the floor for anything, any sort of thing that could, you know, trigger a temper tantrum. It's very nerve-wracking, because you feel other people staring. And even though sometimes people stare, not necessarily because they're judging, but because maybe like they don't know what to do, and they're just kind of like, I want to help, but I don't know exactly. They're kind of just stuck in the middle. Mm-hmm. And so I find that like kind of awkward because you don't know why people are staring. So you obviously just assume the worst. And so when I've seen other parents that have children with autism, or like the kids are acting out, I don't want to make them feel that I'm staring at them negatively. So I just kind of ignore it. Obviously, if it becomes something that's like endangering the child's life to the point that like I could help them, then I would do so. And I haven't been in that position before, but to the point that like the child is on the floor, or they're throwing some sort of temper tantrum, then I don't intervene, just because I feel that it's their parents' decision on what to do. And like, I don't want to make them feel like I'm kind of cutting in somewhere that I shouldn't be stepping into. And I don't want to make them feel like I'm judging them because I'm trying to intervene because they weren't able to control their child. So if that answers your question. Mm-hmm. And as something else I wanted to point out, something very interesting. When it comes to my two younger brothers, I've had some experience dealing with people with autism, because not only working for the American Autism Association as an intern, but also I used to be a swimming instructor for children with special needs. And so I've definitely had a lot of experience with people with autism, people with Down syndrome, people with cerebral palsy, and a lot of different levels of it. And it's always interesting things that I learned from them and that I bring home with me, and how I compare that to my brother. But for Santiago, my other sibling who doesn't have autism, he hasn't really been exposed to autism except for my brother. And now working for the American Autism Association, I facilitate a horse therapy program in Miami. And my brother, the one without autism, sometimes comes to the ranch with me just to kind of hang out and to help me out in whatever I need during the activity. And when he sees other children with autism for the very first time, he turned to me and he was like, wow, they're all like Nico, like they're all like Nicholas, but they're all different too. And I kind of like, wow, he's never seen another child with autism, or one that he's known that has autism until this moment. And he's 12 years old. And I guess like for him, it was kind of a changing point, kind of changed his viewpoint, like, wow, I'm not the only one that deals with this. And I think that it would also be like pretty great for him. Like, he's met other families and other siblings of children with autism. And I think it's a great opportunity for him. So if there's ever any opportunity for anybody out there to have your children interact with other families that are affected by autism, I think it's a great opportunity.
Your brother Santiago is the one that's not autistic, that's correct? Okay, so I'm assuming that he has play dates, like he has friends that come over. How does Nico react to that?
So Nicholas, he's a very social person when it comes to other people. Not necessarily that he can communicate with them, but he just gets very, very excited. And so if somebody walks into the house, he's automatically at the door trying to open the door, and he's slapping his hands and he's screaming. And so for him, that's showing excitement, and that's showing like, welcome to my home. But obviously for other people, they might be kind of startled by it when they open the door and see my brother just flapping. And so for Santi, it's been kind of hard sometimes when he brings friends over, because he doesn't know what to do exactly. So sometimes what my parents do to try to facilitate that is that they'll either have my brother, we have a 2-story home. So like they'll have my brother Nicholas upstairs, entertained with a game or watching TV or something that he likes, and then having Santiago on the first floor. And so even though it's not necessarily, I know that my brother is not, doesn't love Nicholas any less, it's just that sometimes he needs his own space to be able to hang out with his friends at his house and not feel that he has to worry about Nicholas. And I completely understand that. My parents have been great with that, and they try to give him as much space as possible. And even though it's a little hard for him to admit that, sometimes we try to, be a step ahead of him if we know that somebody's coming to the house for him, that we try to make sure that it's as smooth as possible for him so he doesn't feel embarrassed in some way. And yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. You guys have any other questions or concerns or any sort of stories or anything dealing with?
I have a question. Do you feel that if a sibling of someone with autism grows up and is basically required to defer to his or her young, sibling with autism, does that cause have you found in your experience, and do you find in others, that it causes you to defer to other people and not to be as assertive as you might be if you didn't have a sibling with autism?
So I didn't quite catch what you first said, like the first two sentences of.
I'll repeat. So if I grew up and I had a sibling with autism, my parents would spend more time with my sibling with autism than they would with me. I would think that if I grew up in that way, I would naturally defer to anybody around me to make sure everybody else around me got what they needed. I can see that as a challenge.
Right.
Is that your experience, and is that reasonable?
Yes. So I've gone through this personally when I was younger, and especially in high school, when I was saying that I had a lot of trouble talking about autism and admitting it to other people. I felt that I started to become more reserved in general because, autism took a big place in my life, and the fact that I couldn't talk about it meant that, like, I couldn't really talk about other things because it just interacted a lot with other things that I did in my life. And, like, I would invite my friends over my house because, like, I knew that the question would come up, like, what's up with your brother? So then for a while, like, I felt like I was becoming more reserved and I wasn't standing up for myself, or I wasn't standing up for my brother just because I didn't feel like I could. But fortunately, once I started to become more comfortable with the fact that my brother had autism and understanding more of what his autism was, I started to attend more of his doctor's appointments, and I started to ask my parents more about his therapy sessions. And I think that just understanding more of his progress kind of made me more comfortable with the idea that he had autism and what that meant for my family. The other thing too is that, as I mentioned before, I worked a lot with people with special needs, and I've definitely grown in my compassion for people with special needs, especially people with autism. And it just started off because I had a brother with autism, and I wanted to help other people in the same situation. But I've grown to love it so much that I want to make a career out of it. I want to go into public health. And I want to break down the stigma of mental illness and just disorders in general. And, I'm interning now for the American Autism Association, and I've had to talk in front of crowds about autism and what this organization does. Just even sitting here at this webinar and talking to you guys, I was so nervous. But the minute I sat down and I realized I was talking about autism and just my experience with it, I became so comfortable because this is something that I've grown to love, and something that I know that I have an ability to be able to educate other people and to give them the resources so that they can help others that have autism or families. I love doing this, and I feel that even though at the beginning it was hard because I was more reserved about it, I learned to kind of push through that, and I feel that I need to be even more assertive than I normally am, just to make sure that people with autism and people with special needs in general get the treatment and the resources that they need and that they have the right to have. So
thank you. I think we have time for one more. Lexi?
Right. So you mentioned earlier that the sibling can feel guilt and embarrassment in the beginning stages or even like further along. And those feelings can lead to resentment towards the sibling in some ways. How did you communicate those feelings to your parents? And how did they react to you?
So definitely when I started to feel feelings of embarrassment and guilt, I kind of kept those to myself because obviously, like, it's not something that you like to brag about, that you feel embarrassed about your sibling, especially when they have no control over what they have. And so I felt really bad about it, but I didn't know how to talk about it. And I don't think I ever addressed it to my parents per se. I think that they just kind of assumed sometimes that maybe I felt embarrassed, so they would try to relieve the situation that if I was in, like if we were out in public, or if they knew that my friends were coming to my house and they didn't want my brother to be around so that I'd be stressing about it. So it's not something that I ever really addressed with them, but it's something that we've addressed more with my other brother, obviously because he's younger, and so he feels the embarrassment a little bit more. just because he also shared schools with Nicholas. So something that was more current, that all his friends knew who Nicholas was. For me, it was a little easier to kind of keep my personal life and like my social life completely separate. But, you know, I kind of grew out of it a little quicker. I didn't feel the embarrassment stage didn't last very long for me, but I feel like for Santiago, my other brother, it's definitely taken more of a toll on him. He's older now, and he's really been great about the whole situation. So I feel that he doesn't feel as guilty anymore about his feelings. But, you know, I try to encourage it as much as possible for him to talk about it. You know, even when it's not like he really initiates that conversation, but sometimes if I see him embarrassed in some way, or I feel like he's going to be embarrassed because he's my brother, and I sometimes can sense how he's feeling before he even tells me, I call him out on it. And sometimes he doesn't admit it, and sometimes he does. But either way, I just try to give him advice and try to make him feel like it's okay that you feel this way. You know, nobody's perfect, and it's completely normal to feel that way. So that's something that I would definitely recommend. And something that I wish that I would have been more open about when I felt that way, and I would have communicated that with my parents. But, you know, I learned from that, and I'm making sure that Santiago, my other brother, can feel that we're open to him talking about it, whether it's embarrassment or whether it's guilt or any sort of that nature. So I don't know if you guys have any other questions, or we have time for any more questions. No? Okay, so I mean, it was very great to talk to all of you. Thank you all so amazing questions here. And I hope that this webinar helped in some way. If you guys learned something new. If not, then I know there's a lot of information out there, and I hope that all of you guys can share this with anybody else that you think might benefit from it. And yeah, thank you very much. Have a good night.